The scent of jasmine, her favorite, was the first thing that hit me when I walked into our house. It was a smell I'd always associated with her, with warmth, with home. But today, it felt like a cruel mockery. The jasmine air freshener she'd bought last week, the one I'd thought was a sweet, domestic gesture, now reeked of deceit. I'd spent the last 3 weeks putting the pieces together, the strange late nights at work, the hushed phone calls, the way she'd flinch if I touched her a certain way. It was a slow, agonizing realization, each piece of evidence like a tiny shard of glass embedding itself in my heart. I'd always considered myself a good husband. I'd never missed a birthday, a date night, or a chance to tell her how beautiful she was. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. We'd built a life, a home, and I'd thought, a love that would last forever. Now, I felt like a fool. The kind of fool that gets laughed at in movies, the kind that never sees it coming. The note on the door was my final act. Not of despair, but of cold, calculated fury. I'd watched too many of those crime documentaries. Revenge, as they often say, is best served cold. I'd spent the last few days transforming our picture-perfect home into a trap. I'd carefully hidden the camera behind the wall mirror in the entryway, a small, inconspicuous lens that would capture every moment of her grand entrance. I heard the door open, the familiar click of the lock, and then, silence. My heart hammered in my chest. It wasn't just the adrenaline, it was a deep, raw hatred I never knew I was capable of feeling. She was here, and then, I heard her footsteps, light and almost carefree, followed by the soft rustling of what I knew were roses. She always loved roses. He probably thought they were a grand gesture. I could almost hear the smarmy things he must have said to her. My hands clenched into fists. I was waiting in the living room, concealed behind the bookshelf. My view was perfect, the strategically placed mirror giving me a reflection of the entryway. And then she came into view. Laura, my wife. She was radiant, almost glowing. She wore a simple sundress that I'd bought her during our honeymoon in Greece. In her hand, she held a lavish bouquet of deep red roses. The scent of her perfume wafted in, that same jasmine scent, but now mixed with something else, something floral and musky that made my stomach churn. I watched as she smoothed her dress, a small smile playing on her lips. She looked like she'd had the time of her life. This was probably going to be a "we need to talk" type of arrival, the precursor to a fabricated confession. She took another step into the house, the roses held against her chest. Then she saw it. The note, taped directly to the door, large and obvious. Her smile faltered, her eyes widened, and she froze. I heard the paper crinkle as she reached out, a manicured hand grasping at the thin white sheet. I'd written in large, bold letters, so she couldn't possibly miss it, "Turn around." I saw her read the note, her face contorting in confusion. She slowly turned, the bouquet falling to the floor with a soft thud, roses scattering across the entryway rug. She looked around, her eyes scanning the room, trying to find me. That's when I stepped out from behind the bookshelf. Her breath hitched. What are you doing here?" she stammered, her eyes darting around the room. The color drained from her face. "Surprised," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. I watched as she tried to read my expression. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "Find out what?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to play the innocent, the confused wife, but I could see the fear in her eyes, that flicker of panic. She was never a good liar. "Don't," I spat the word, my control beginning to crack. "Don't pretend you have no idea. I know everything, Laura." I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. She was starting to look like the guilty one. She tried to talk, but no words came out. I took another step towards her, my face inches from hers. "I know about him. I know about the lies, the late nights, the phone calls, the jasmine-scented betrayal." Her mouth opened, but still, no sound came out. The camera recorded everything. Every tremble of her lip, every flicker of her eye, every single guilty expression. I reached out, grabbing her wrist, my fingers digging into her flesh, a firm, unyielding grip. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice rising with every word. "Where is the man who's been sneaking around in my marriage?" She didn't answer, her eyes wide with fear. I tightened my grip, and she winced. "Tell me," I yelled, my patience finally exhausted. I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Can't or won't? I asked, the calmness I'd been forcing fading into a deep rage. I knew where he was. I had his address, thanks to a very helpful private investigator. I don't care anymore, Laura. It doesn't matter if you tell me or not. I released her wrist and walked toward the door. She watched me, a mixture of fear and confusion on her face. What are you doing? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer her. I opened the door, grabbed my jacket from the coat rack, and walked out, leaving her standing there, among the scattered roses, her face pale with fear. His name was Jake. I knew it from her phone records. I'd spent weeks going through her old emails, call history, text messages. Jake worked at her office, a smooth-talking finance guy with a wife and 2 kids. He was everything I hated, selfish, deceitful, and a coward. His house was a modest place in the suburbs, the kind of house that screams middle-class mediocrity. It was the perfect stage for the drama I was about to unleash. I parked my car down the street, my heart pounding. I felt the rage bubbling beneath the surface, the righteous fury of a man betrayed. I walked up to his front door, my hand trembling as I rang the doorbell. He opened the door, a confused expression on his face. He wasn't expecting anyone, and judging by the way he was dressed, he wasn't expecting company. He wore a simple polo shirt and cargo shorts. He looked smug, almost. I took that as an insult. Can I help you? He asked, his voice casual, almost bored. You're Jake, right? I said, my voice calm, but firm. You work at the same office as Laura. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition, then fear. He tried to close the door, but I pushed back, stepping inside his house. He stumbled backward. Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling now. I didn't answer. I slammed the door shut. You're the man sleeping with my wife, I said, taking another step forward. He began to back away, moving into the living room. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape. I laughed, a bitter, cruel sound. Don't insult my intelligence. I know everything. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off with a swift, hard punch to his face. His head snapped back and he cried out in pain, falling back into the sofa. I could smell the fear coming off him, like a bad smell. He grabbed his face, blood dripping through his fingers. His eyes pleaded for mercy. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a cold, hard pleasure that I'd never expected. You think you can just waltz into another man's life and steal his wife? You think there are no consequences? I asked. What about her husband, Jake? Have you ever considered how it would feel? I dragged him off the sofa. He flailed, tried to push me away. I'd trained in self-defense for years, though I never thought I'd use it. I brought my knee to his gut, and he doubled over, gasping for air. I grabbed his head and slammed it into his glass coffee table. It shattered. Glass went everywhere, small slivers embedding themselves in his face. He howled. This isn't over, I snarled, kicking him in the side. He cried out again, his face contorted in pain. I wanted to make sure he remembered every second. I wanted him to feel just a fraction of the pain I had been enduring for weeks. I wanted to see the smirk leave his face, and for him to realize what a pathetic excuse of a human being he was. I left him there, curled on the floor, bleeding and broken. I walked out, leaving the door wide open. Let the neighbors see. Let everyone know the kind of man he was. When I returned home, Laura was gone. The scattered roses lay on the rug, a testament to her betrayal. I didn't feel any satisfaction. I felt nothing but a hollow ache in my chest. I sat down on the sofa, the image of Jake's face flickering in my mind. I knew that I'd done something that couldn't be undone. It was over. It was done. The next day, I packed her things into boxes. I did it without emotion, like I was cleaning out a storage unit. I even found the Jasmine air freshener, still half full. I threw it in the trash, along with the remnants of our life together. I put the house up for sale. I moved out and found a small apartment. I never saw Laura again. I never spoke to her again, either. I know she tried to contact me, through mutual friends, and via email. I deleted the messages without even opening them. There was no going back. I would never trust her again, I would never let her into my life again, and I would never forgive her. I was done with her. I was done with the lies, the pain, the betrayal. I was done with Laura. I had gotten my revenge, and I had left, and she had to live with the consequences of her actions.